Bólam fáilte a chuir roimh go léir anseo go Kilmore Umhranóna. Kilmurry is an ancient and historical village about a mile south of the Cork-Macroom Road in the heart of mid-Cork. We are standing this evening in front of the Kilmurry Museum, the Folk and Memorial Museum of Kilmurry, in honour of the great patriarch Terence MacSweeney here in the centre of the village. We will start this evening's tour at the museum, and we will move on from the museum to other areas around the village and around the locality, and we will move back again into the museum at a later time. The area that the Kilmurry Historical Museum Society cover is an area roughly 6 miles by 4, you could say, not really confined to that, but at the same time the map covering this area, the Ordnance Survey map that is, covers an area roughly from Castlemore to Relton, about 6 miles and about 4 miles across. So that is the area in which we have a primary interest. At this point I would like to ask John Sheehan to outline the various historical artefacts, buildings and so forth that are in that area. So I would like at this stage to hand over to John Sheehan, who will explain all these items to you. John Sheehan.
As Jim has already outlined, the area is very, very rich in historical and archaeological sites. And as he said, the area covered an area from possibly from Threlton to Castlemore in the east, and from Bingor in the south to Shandling in the north. And within that area there are no fewer than 43 historical and archaeological sites. And the oldest site possibly there is somewhere between 2000 and 2500 BC. Also within that area there are 35 ring forts, there are 21 Fulloch feast sites or old cooking sites, and there are 9 souterrains. And the largest souterrain possibly of its type in Ireland is found under the Beamish Mausoleum in Duniskey. The reason, the first day ever, I suppose, for founding a museum in Kilmurry was because that the people around, a few people took an interest in and realised also that this place was so rich in this sort of thing, and they decided on doing something about it. And I suppose that today the museum houses many artifacts related to that, and there are no fewer. I think the recent count of a few years ago we had over 1,000 items on display, and all the items are in some way connected, whether they're archaeological, historical or of local interest. But every item, no matter how little it is of some interest.
Standing right in front of us is the oldest church in Kilmurry, the original Kilmore, from which this locality and this parish takes its name. We are now standing in the main doorway of the ruined church which we mentioned earlier, and here to tell us about the church itself and about its historical association with this locality and its place in the locality, and to put that in perspective, John Sheehan.
Thank you, Jim. I suppose standing here, we're standing at possibly one of the oldest Christian sites, or early Christian sites, maybe certainly in the county of Cork and in the diocese of Cork. And there is evidence, and the current evidence would suggest that Kilmurry itself was an early Christian settlement, that it was enclosed within a boundary wall, maybe enclosing maybe 40 or 50 acres of ground, and that is evident from the air. If that is so, then Kilmurry would also have had a round tower. The present building that we're looking at, I think it's one of the largest of its kind, the largest church in the diocese of Cork, and it's 100 feet long by 33 feet wide. It was in ruin before Cromwell came here. Many people would are inclined to think that this was burned by Cromwell, but in actual fact it wasn't. It was in ruin long before Cromwell ever came here. But one thing that the Cromwellian forces did do here, that they built a timber structure within the building here and garrisoned their troops here for some 4 or 5 years after. And the other things about it, if you go to Ballyvourne and if you go to other places, you find Protestant churches within old cemeteries there, within Catholic cemeteries. Here this is not the case. And this is not in any way being nasty towards our separate brethren or anything else. But at one stage here, the Church of Ireland people decided that we're going to have this place roofed, and maybe in a sense, maybe it's a great pity that did not happen. But it was in 1833, Father McGrath here in Kilmurry had a monument erected on the wall to his mother, Julian McGrath, and had it registered, and therefore was able to object to the church being restored. looking back with hindsight now, maybe it was a pity that it didn't happen today. Maybe the Rhone it wouldn't be a Rhone. But anyway, buried within the cemetery here, the church itself is OG in its architecture, and that would suggest that it's 14th century. And Canon Carlan, in his history of Cork, maintained that this church was much older than that, and I'm inclined to believe that this is another church built within the same enclosure. And again, the burials here date back, I'd say you could date back to 800 or 900 AD. And I suppose thinking of the present burials that are there, right beside me here is Michael Galvin and Bishop Galvin's people. They're all buried here just beside us, and we'll go around to them later. And also buried here are the ancestors of Terence McSweeney and the ancestors of Ronnie Delaney, and the Sean Hagerty, who was OC of the Cork Brigade, is also buried here. J.T. Gleeson, the composer of Bolt Teddy Quill, is buried here. And then we have the O'Manneys and the Murphys and the O'Keefes. Of the 165 headstones in the cemetery here, I think there are 37 headstones to Murphys alone. There are 29 to O'Manneys, and there are 21 to McSweeney's. So that will tell you that the family. Yeah, this is the tomb of Captain Arthur O'Keefe, who was one of the wild geese and returned here after the restoration of Charles II. And they were one of the Catholic families themselves, and the McSweeneys were the two main Catholic families here in Kilmurry after that period. And we'll move down along to the other corner to Terence O'Connor, who was a local student.
We see here in front of us the gravestone of Andrew O'Connor, one of the Fenians of the Kilmurry area. And underneath we can see here a very interesting few lines which mourn the man who has died. What patriot voice is smothered here in dust, till waked to join the chorus of the just? So one brief line an answer sad supplies. Honoured, beloved, mourned, here O'Connor lies. His worth, his warmth, his heart, let friendship go seek his genius in his living clay.
We are standing here in the burial place of the Galvin family, and they're all the relatives of Bishop Galvin and his relatives dating way back. And it's also the burial place of Michael Galvin, who was killed in Lisada ambush in 1920, and that was the first ambush in County Cork after 1916. Not the first one in Ireland, but the first one in County Cork. And standing beside me here is Bishop Galvin's niece, Miss Eileen O'Mahony. Eileen?
Hello. I said this is the burial ground of the Galvins. My mother was Kate Galvin, and she was born in Newstown. Where all the Galvins came from Gronriach, and they would have been in the parish of Kilmurry. Most of them are buried here, and some of their ancestors are buried. The stones here date back to 1755, and I'm sure some of them are not buried, their names are not on the stones. Many years ago, some of these people used to come from Kerry in the long car to be buried from Kilgarvan. And but at the present moment, the present Galvins have their burial ground is in the new cemetery in St. Mary's. Is that all right?
This is the second burial, the second tomb of the O'Keefes. Again, the chief is buried within the old Rhone itself, and this is the second one here in this area, just inside the gate on the left. This is the burial place of Hugh Delaney, and the ancestors of Ron Delaney, the famous Olympic medalist, are all buried here in this little plot here in the right-hand side after entering the main gate in the cemetery. And then we'll move, and across the way here is the burial place of Michael Murphy from near Crookstown. He was the father of Bishop Murphy of Hobart, Tasmania. And this Bishop Murphy was the founder of the Indian mission, the Minute Mission to India, which was founded in around about 1813. And it had to be discontinued because of the famine. They couldn't get funds to fund the thing, and then he became Archbishop of Hobart in Tasmania. And he had been in Ireland around the time that Daniel O'Connell died, and it was he who said the funeral mass for Daniel O'Connell in Genoa on his way back. And moving across the way again over here, as I said, As I said, the church would have been restored, but for the fact that this priest, Father McGrath, had a monument erected to his mother. And this is the monument, or the tombstone of Julian McGrath, and the date is 1833. As already mentioned, Kilmurry has been involved, I suppose, in the local politics and the local happenings all down through the ages. And here is a tombstone to Murphy Derivs. And this man, John Murphy of Bowlback, was buried here in 1822. He was one of the people that took part in the Whiteby ambush in Trelton in 1822. This is his burial place here, and it's one of the Murphy tombstones in the cemetery. This is the burial place of the ancestors of Terence McSweeney, the murdered Lord Mayor of Cork, and hence the name, the name for the museum in Kilmore. And all his ancestors, all his relatives are buried here. And it is said that the last of the McSweeney chieftains are buried here in the cemetery. Whether this is the grave or not, I don't know, but it certainly, tradition has it that the last of the chieftains were buried here.
We have here in front of us the gravestone of a very distinguished man from the locality, of Father Dennis O'Mahony, who died in 1855. He was a missionary priest, and rounds are paid at this grave because it is believed that by paying these rounds a cure for pains can be achieved here. In other words, if one pays rounds here, one expects that one's pains will be cured. The headstone was cleaned recently. We don't know who cleaned it, but we believe that it was cleaned by somebody who was cured of pains by paying the rounds here.
This is the tombstone of Sean Haggart, the OC of the 1st Cork Brigade. He's buried here in this little spot in the corner of the cemetery. And it's interesting to note that it was here in Kilmurry that Kilmurry was the rallying point for the IRA on Easter Sunday of 1916, and Terence McSweeney was one of the leaders, and also Thomas McCurtain.
This plaque was erected by the Kilmurry Historical Society to commemorate the poet John Thomas Gleeson of Clonagluck, Royland, who composed the famous song The Bold Taily Quill. The poet is buried here. This plaque commemorates him. He's one of the number of poets coming from the Kilmurry area. Another famous poet being O'Connell from Corkclough, who composed the song Gra Macree, I Long to See Old Ireland Free Once More. O'Connell is buried in Listowel.
Well, I would like to meet you tomorrow.
I know you wouldn't be playing anyway, that's for sure. I know you wouldn't be playing anyway, that was for sure.
Having left the graveyard, we are now inside the McSweeney Memorial Museum in Kilmurry. This museum was founded in 1964 when a group of people in the locality became concerned with the development and expansion of the locality and the dangers inherent in that for the historical and archaeological remains of the area. The museum was officially opened on the 19th of September 1965 by Maura Brew, the daughter of Terence McSweeney. The reason that this is called the McSweeney Museum, and the reason that it is in this building, is that the McSweeneys came from this locality, and in actual fact, in pre-famine times, they lived in this particular house. Now, the people who were involved at the beginning and who founded the museum were Patrick Sheehan, and you could say that the Sheehan home was actually the headquarters of the national movement in Kilmurry for very many years. Donlo Bukala, who was a national teacher in the village of Kilmurry, and Father Donlo Manny, who is attached to the Columban missionaries, being a nephew of the founder of that mission, Bishop Galvin. You had Mrs. O'Sullivan, who was the first secretary and who is now the curator of the museum, and will talk to us about it later in the programme. You had Mrs. Sheehan, you had Dan Holland, John Howard, the Toomey sisters, Nellie and Nora from Dunmarklum. You had Professor David O'Mahony, who is presently the president of the society, Willie O'Connell of the Cork Examiner. You had Mrs. Tuig, Sheila O'Callaghan, Michael Murphy, Mrs. Murphy, Jerry O'Leary, Mrs. Cronin, Eileen O'Mahony, sister of Father Donal O'Mahony, and you had Connie Lynch, and there were many others as well who were associated with the founding and setting up of this museum. It is a folk museum, and what we have here are artifacts and items which show the ways that people walked and lived in days gone by. They are the instruments for living, if you like, that were used in the locality in days gone by. We are here in Kishtin on Aharpadar at the moment, which contains the furniture and many of the effects used by Antaharpadar. And here to tell us about it is our curator, Mrs. O'Sullivan. Mrs. O'Sullivan.
I'm one of the founder members of the museum, and it has now in existence 20 years, practically 20 years. Well, this is Kishtin Antaharpadar, and I think the items we are most proud of are Antaharpadar's furniture, namely his table, dresser, the clock which is away to be repaired, fire irons and settle and writing and photographs. And all the other items here were donated to us by various people in the locality. The fire machine there is over 100 years old, so are the milking stools, and of course the spinning wheels and the churn barrels. That is on the wall there is a map of Liscarrigan, the home of Antaharpadar, and that is his photograph of him and a plaque of him, and those are photographs of his family and a specimen of his handwriting. With all the other items then are national and historic pictures, such as Parnell and the three martyred priests killed during the Black and Tan times in Ireland, an assembly of the Irish Parliament, and books and papers of every description, practically all of Irish history and archaeological items. And I think, as far as I can see now, there's nothing else in this kitchen that I could describe to you that are of any interest. The hooded cloak, of course, that is the old Kinsale. I think it was the Kinsale cloak, as is slightly different from the Macroom cloak. That was donated to us by the Toomey sisters, and there was another one also donated to us by the O'Mahony family of Kilmore Shamroga. And all these pots and kettles and all these items around the fireplace were donated by people in the locality, in this locality. Those wall plates were donated to us by the O'Sullivan family of Donnablaw, and all the items of delf on the dresser were donated by local people. Some were collected by Father Donal O'Mahony, various parts of the country. Some of those jars, one of which was donated to us by Mrs. Murphy, who is a member. And we have an amount of old newspapers in the case there, which are available for anybody that wants to see them. I think that is all now in this kitchen. The maps on the wall, of course, were all provided by Father Donal O'Mahony also. We acquired the furniture through the services of our late chairman, Dan Holland, whose wife, I think, is related to the O'Riordan family now in Liscarrigan. And we were very, very lucky to get it because there were several people from his own diocese anxious to get the furniture.
At Boston, and next to her, you have made some contributions of items here to the museum.
The famous Fenby, the famous race horse.
Yes, the stirrups, was it?
Yes.
And would you like to tell us about the stirrups? Or?
Well, really, they belong to Sean O'Gotzel. You all heard of him. You didn't know him, I suppose. But my husband and Sean O'Gotzel were great friends. And when he was dying, he gave the hunting horn and the stirrups to my husband. And I say Fenby will belong to Sean O'Gotzel. So.
And you passed them on to the museum?
I passed on. I didn't pass on the hunting horn. My grandson has that now. He's with the Musgrove Harriers.
Very good.
But I passed on the stirrups.
Very good. Thank you indeed, Mrs. Buckley. And this is Eileen O'Mahony, one of the vice presidents, and has made an enormous contribution through the years to the museum. Eileen, what do you think are the advantages and so on of this museum for the locality? Do you think we have room enough? And so
Well, I think this museum is far too small, and if we could raise enough money to build a new museum, it would be to our advantage, because we have too many items for this small place, and please the Lord, we'll have a new museum in a few years' time.
Thank you, Eileen. And next we have Nora Toole. Nora, would you agree with Eileen in that respect? That,
I would agree with Eileen in that respect. I've been a member here since the beginning of the opening of the museum, and we presented a hooded cloak belonged to my mother that was made in Macroom, and gold watch belonged to my father. Well, there's a lot of beautiful stuff here, but we have very little room, and we're looking forward to building a new museum.
Very good, thank you very much. And then Tom Sheehan. Tom is a fundraiser, a little fundraising museum.
Well,
Already.
In reference to the new museum, we have already been presented a site by Mrs. Buckley, then Eileen Vogler, and we have made a start on site, and as far as clearing the site, but that's as far as we've got so far. But with God's help and the generosity of the people of the locality, it will not be too long if we make a start.
These are some of the but we are now here with us this evening we have some people from Macroom, members of the Macroom Historical Society, and I think this shows the sort of fraternity that exists between the various historical societies in the locality. Kilmurry is not unique in having a historical society. We may have been a little ahead of the others, but still we have a number of them now around the area, and here we have some of the Macroom people with us this evening. We have first of all Christy Lehan here, who now here this evening in Kilmurry, not only are we talking about Kilmurry Museum, but we are talking about museums in a broader scale because Kilmurry is not the only place that has a museum. We have museums in Canopy and we have museum in Macroom. There are museums in many other places, and all these museums perform a very important function in the locality for the community. And it's good to see that so many areas are becoming conscious of the advantages of having a museum in their locality. And just to introduce you briefly to the Macroom people here this evening, we have first of all here Christy Lehan, who is the chairman of the not only have we the people of Kilmurry here this evening, but we're also glad to welcome our friends from the Macroom Historical Society to this evening's get-together here. That shows a bond between the various historical societies from the various areas. Kilmurry is established, or has been established, for quite some time. It's been there for 20 years or more. There's also a historical society now in Canopy, and there's one in Macroom, which I've just mentioned, and we're glad to welcome the Macroom people here because it shows the value that these various people in various communities place in museums, and they believe that it's important to have a museum in the locality. The people of the locality believe it, and they invariably support these museums. And I would like to welcome here this evening, first of all, Christy Leahy, chairman of the Macroom Museum. Christy, you're most welcome here to Kilmore this evening.
Thank you.
We're glad you were able to make it out here this evening.
Thank you very much.
So,
I'm
how
glad
was
to be here too.
Yeah. How is your museum getting on in Macroom?
Good, very good. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
In leaps and bounds, as far as you say.
And now, next to Christy here this evening, we have Tom Linehan, who is treasurer of the Macroom Museum. Tom, how are the funds in Macroom?
Our financial position at the moment is very sound, and we are very grateful to the people who subscribe annually to our collection. And I would like now, I would take this opportunity of thanking them for their generosity at all times and their cooperation and help.
Thank you very much, Tom. Now we have next to him again Mr. Eugene O'Riordan, who is the secretary of the Macroom Museum. Christy, how is the job of secretary going in Macroom? Is it a difficult job? Are you getting good cooperation?
Well, yes, we are getting very good cooperation. We would like to get maybe the people involved a bit more, but we are getting good cooperation, and we are glad to be part of the preservation of our heritage, and we would hope that we will persevere in the future.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed, Eugene. Now we have here with us as well Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is the curator of the museum in Macroom, and I'm sure she can tell us a good deal about what they have in the museum and the services that it gives to the community, not just historically but otherwise as well. Mrs. Fitzgerald, would you tell us about your position?
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Long. May I represent myself as Mrs. Catherine Fitzgerald. Well, from June until October I'm dealing with tourists from 11 o'clock until 5. I meet them from all nations. I'm able to provide to tourists to different directions and good facilities in the town and its surroundings, and I would hope that it would improve, and I would hope that eventually that we would get some sort of a tourist office into our museum. It would be a terrific help to us financially if we could try and improve on that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. It must be obvious by now that a combined effort between all the various museum and historical society committees in the locality would go a long way towards providing a wealth of information, not only for the inhabitants of the locality but also for the tourist industry in general. And we feel that the museum is coming out, as it were, out of the actions and works of the museum are coming out of the museum and will be in the future the basis on which information can be provided in any locality of the items which are of interest to tourists as well as the items which are of historical value. And not only will this be educational, but it will also be to the financial advantage of the community in general. Now this is a very interesting little area here in our museum, a case which John Sheehan has just opened, and I'll hand over to John to explain to you all about it. John.
Thank you, Jim. As already mentioned, we have monuments out all around the area here dating back, as I said, to somewhere around about between 2000 and 2500 BC. And not alone have we got the field monuments, but we have also got the artifacts that were found in such places. And here we have a little stone axe here. This would have been with a handle on it or hafted, and the date on that is somewhere around about 2300 BC. And just alongside it here is a little stone hammer, which was also found in Duniski. And the date on that would be around about the same period again, about 2000 to 2300 BC, or thereabouts. Here again we have another little item, a little stone, an unfinished stone hammer. Again, the date on that one is about the same period again. And here again is another little thing, which was also a little piece of a stone hammer, used again by Stone Age men, which goes to show that this place was occupied by men way long before Christianity ever came on the scene. The next item here, this little thing here, was a drinking beaker found in a souterrain or cave in the Kilmurry area. This was dating to somewhere around about 600 BC. Again, very, very interesting, because there are very, very few items found anywhere, items found inside in this type of feature. This is a drinking beaker found, as I said, inside in a souterrain. Again, this little chalice or this little goblet here was found locally again inside in the wall. It may have been used in penal times as a chalice or something. It's an interesting little thing. Again, the date on that we don't know, but it's something, it's handmade and certainly very, very ancient. Maybe a couple of 100 years old at the very, very, very least. And then beside that again, we have a little drinking glass here. Again, interesting in the sense that while you know, to look at it, you'd imagine that it was made of plastic or something else, but it's made out of a cow's horn again. And again, the age on that is somewhere a couple of 100 years old or thereabouts. There are many, many other items around. As I said, we have field monuments, but not alone have we field monuments, we have the items that have been found inside in that. And that goes to show, or goes to prove, that man lived here long before Christianity ever came. Now we'll hand over now to Mrs. O'Sullivan, the curator of the museum, and she'll tell us something about the Terence MacSweeney connection with this museum.
Well, all the items in this case now are pertaining to Terence MacSweeney. The MacSweeney family tree, an essay written by an English schoolboy giving his reasons why he considered Terence MacSweeney to be the greatest man, and family photos of the MacSweeney family, and a pair of gloves worn by Terence MacSweeney on public occasions, carrying banners, and that's a bust of Terence MacSweeney, presented to the museum by Donald O'Murrough of the College of Art in Dublin. And all these are books used by Terence MacSweeney, books in the Irish language used by him when he studied Irish in Ballyferriter and Cooley. And just a photograph of Clodagh Castle, which was a MacSweeney castle. That item concerns Kilmurry in the 18th century, 1843 to be exact. And that piece of wood is a piece of wood from the case which brought the coffin containing Terence MacSweeney's remains from Brixton to Cork City. When the British Army tossed the case out onto the quay in Cork, that piece broke off the case, and Sean O'Keefe, Father Sean O'Keefe, his father was present. He was one of the Guard of Honour, and he picked it up and was presented to this museum later, at the time of the opening, by Father Sean O'Keefe, God rest him, he's now dead. And those are portions of letters written by Terence MacSweeney to Cathal Brew from Brixton Jail, and a photograph of Thomas McCurtain, who was Lord Mayor of Cork before Terence MacSweeney, and a picture of Roger Casement lying in state in Dublin when his remains were long later brought to Dublin. Of course, he was executed in England in 1916, but his remains later were brought to Dublin, and he's interred in Glasnevin. I think that's all. And that, though, all those are rifles used in local ambushes and bandoliers presented to us by the men who used them, really. And this is a specimen of just a few words written and worked out on that with a nail by a prisoner before he was executed in Kilmainham Jail in 1916. These are all various weapons, bayonets and coffee pipes, and different bayonets, all types of bayonets, and That's a few Gurkha swords or Oriental swords, all presented by different people from around the country. That's the wheel of one of the Crossley tenders at Kilmichael ambush, which was presented to the museum by the late John Griffin. He was a young boy of 13 at the time of the ambush, and the following day he buried 4 of the wheels. And when we opened up the museum here, he dug them up and presented one to us and another to the Cork Museum. And that is the original cross that was in Kilmichael before the present limestone one was put up. All these Celtic crosses were made by the late Palmer Gra, who was a blacksmith and was at one time Lord Mayor of Cork also. And all these are items used on the farms and in different crafts. Those are a set of cooper's tools used for making barrels, which were very much used before we had any zincs galvanized. That is a mantra used in the domains by the landlords here, and for people who went in poaching. And if they were caught in these mantraps, they were transported to Tasmania or someplace like that. That's a corking machine, and a machine for clipping horses, a water pump from Lizardo Creamery. All these other things are reaping hooks and flax implements and salmon troys and different hatching forks. And these are in old bellows from a forge, and all the blacksmith's utensils, including the anvil. And all along here now are all, we have that. All these items on these shelves now are used in for different purposes. That was a machine used for dosing horses. Those were bottles, all various bottles. I might talk away now. These are all old irons of different sorts for ironing clothes. Flat irons and box irons and all types of irons. This is a stone cutter small, used by the Hickeys of Aherla in the 17th century. And these are the old scales and weights, which I suppose you remember in the shops. And this item is a statue of William Shakespeare. It was presented to this museum by Paddy Manny of Shandingen. And this is an item used for washing wool or woolen blankets. And all these are different car lamps and different outdoor lanterns. That one up there was used in where the Muskerry tram came into Coachford station. That was one of the lamps hanging outside. Of course, there was no electricity in those days. And this is the plan of our new museum, whenever it will be erected. That is the plan. That's the plan of the new museum.
Yeah. And starting off with the Kilmurry area, which is sheet 83, and it's covering an area, as I've already mentioned. Kilmurry is here in the centre, and it's covering an area from Castlemore to almost Tiralton, which is 6 miles this way, roughly, or there, 6 miles there or thereabouts, and it's covering from Bingore to Shandingen in the north, right over here. And within that area, there are no fewer than 43 historical and archaeological sites. The historical and archaeological sites are marked in red. As you can see, the red marks right around here are all historical sites, dating from about 2500 BC up to 100 years ago. And then the blue ones there are 35 ring forts, and which are the blue marks that you can see right around the place, and there are 35 of those. Then we have Fullochfee are all cooking sites, prehistoric cooking sites, and they are marked in green, as you can see right around here. And then we have 9 souterrains, which are not marked there. They would have been in yellow, but they are not there. And one can be found under the mausoleum in Duniski, in the site of Beamish's Tower, and that is the largest of its kind found anywhere in Ireland. And it was discovered way back in 1928 by somebody ferreting when that little dog fell in, and when they tried to rescue the dog, the person themselves fell in, and it was only the luck of the Lord that he was ever found there. Since then that has been opened up and investigated, and it contains no fewer than 7 rooms, and it is one of the largest souterrains in Ireland, and it's hewn out of solid rock and was under, right now it's under the Beamish mausoleum or tower, as it's called locally, and which was originally the site of the Niski Parish Church. And this souterrain was definitely connected with the church site that existed there before the thing was changed. All the pictures and photographs that you can see along the wall here are of famous people, Terence McSweeney and De Valera and Michael Collins and all the others. And down here we have the Shears brothers, and one would ask, what connections would the Shears brothers have with Kilmurry? But they have a little connection too. They were connected with the Warren family of Warren Scott, and they were United Irishmen. And right down below that you can see a collection of quern stones, or old hand mill stones, and they are dating away back to early Christian and possibly to prehistoric times. There's a little collection here, and over here we have a little thing called a saddle quern. So they are old hand mills. And here down across the way here is one of the last pictures taken of Michael Collins, right down here, taken in Kilmallock the day before he was killed in Bernabla in August of 1922.
We have here now two ancient hollies stretching back practically to the founding of the GA Association. The one here held by the little girl, this one, was used in the first All-Ireland, and this one here was used in the 1912 All-Ireland. As you can see, the boss of the holly has changed quite a bit since those days. The one here, which was used in the first All-Ireland, was on display in Cork at the Centenary exhibition until a few days ago, so we have it back here again at home in the Kilmurry Museum.
The birds is that they originally came from Killarney, some big house in Killarney. They were donated to us by the O'Mahony family of Lasarda House, and they are very much admired, very much by everybody visiting the museum, really.
You have seen many of the items and artifacts which we have on display here in the museum, so you will understand what we are involved with and what we are trying to achieve, and you will understand what people find of interest. The building that we are in has been made available to the museum committee by the Galvin family of Kilmurry, who have made it available for the last 20 years without charge to the museum committee. And I think it's only fair at this stage that we should say who today's members of that committee are. And the patron at the present time is Father Donal O'Mahony of the Columban Missions, also the parish priest of the parish, the late Father Kelleher, who has died recently, and we're in the process of having his name replaced on the roll of honour of our committee at the present time. The president is Professor David O'Mahony of UCC, and the vice presidents are Nora Toomey and Eileen Benny Buchla. That is the widow of the late Donal Buchla, and Chairman May Fain. The vice chairman is John Sheehan, son of Pack Sheehan, one of the founder members and one of the main driving forces behind the museum in its early days. The present secretary is Mairead Herlihy, formerly Ní Buchla, again a daughter of Donal Buchla, and the treasurers are Sarah O'Reilly and Derek Kelleher. Now the curator is Mrs. O'Sullivan, who has been with the museum since the beginning and who has given tremendous service to the museum. The committee is composed of Tom Murray, Bridie Sheehan, Eileen O'Mahony, Tom Sheehan, Dermot Bradfield, Nellie Toomey, and Nora, her sister, Margaret Cotter, Kit Toomey, Dan Holland, John Galvin, and many others. Also Kenneth Nichols of UCC. There are many others in the locality who from time to time have taken an interest in the museum and who attend meetings whenever any item of interest to them comes up, and we welcome all the members, all those who are members, and we would welcome anybody else who wishes to become a member of our museum. There are some honorary life members, Donnacha O'Dooling, Rita and John Galvin, who own the premises in which the artifacts are housed, and Mrs. Folly from Cork, who was connected with the school which was set up by Terence McSweeney's sister, and where she is a member of the past pupils organisation there. The museum is open from Easter to the 1st of October on Sunday afternoons, and it can be seen at other times by appointment with the curator, Mrs. O'Sullivan. The monthly meeting is held on the second Friday of every month at 8:30 p.m. and we're quite proud of what we have here. We think a great deal has been done. We realise that a great deal more needs to be done. We realise that we're running short of space, and has been said earlier this evening by the members of the committee, we're looking forward to the day when we will be able to have a new building and a new museum, and where we will be able to display our multitude of artefacts to far greater advantage than they are at the present time. Thank you.
On behalf of the committee and in the absence of our secretary, I would like to express our thanks to Mr. Kelleher for coming here and to give us an opportunity to appear and with our museum and all it contains on local museum. And another thing I would like to say, if I may, I would like to express my thanks, and I suppose that of all the committee, to our former treasurer Dan Holland, whom I could never say enough about. He was here regularly and punctually at every meeting and kept our accounts in perfect order, and he's no longer with our committee for personal reasons, but I would very much like to have him on the committee again, and I as personally could not say enough about Dan Holland nor thank him enough for what he done with me and others for this museum. Thank you very much.